looking to up your real estate investing game? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Sub2Deals Show with your host, Sub2 expert William Tingle.
Today's episode is sponsored by Kevin at Strong Jacob and Associates. If you want to learn how to do loan modifications, give Kevin a call today at 253-753-9595. Hey, Sub2ers, my name is William Tingle of Sub2Deals.com. I'd like to welcome you to this episode of the Sub2Deals Show, where we talk about all things subject to. Now, occasionally we will cover other topics, but it's always something to help you with your real estate investing business. Today is another episode in our Real Expert series, where we feature real experts in one or more aspects of real estate investing, or on topics that impact real estate investors. Today's guest is Scott Horne. Scott's area of expertise is everything real estate related. Specifically, we've got Scott on today. He's a very well-known attorney in the Dallas, Texas area and nationwide. And we wanted to have him on today to talk just a little bit about some maybe do's and don'ts with the use of land trust and also with seller financing. Texas has some pretty strict laws there regarding contract for deed and that sort of thing. And that's really the way a lot of our students exit properties that they pick up subject to. So we wanted to have him in to talk about some of those things. So Scott, welcome to the show.
Thanks, William. Good to be here. Look forward to talking to you and your students about all things owner finance. We love that type of a business.
Right. When I got started investing, like everybody else, I knew absolutely nothing about it beyond signing this huge stack of paperwork on the couple of personal residents that I had bought. I ordered a Carlton Sheets course and got started, so I knew nothing. But I looked at a lot of things. Most people steered newbies toward wholesaling. That didn't appeal to me. I really wanted to do something to create an income to leave my job. So I quickly moved toward acquiring property and then selling it on either a lease option or with seller financing, which eventually evolved to pure buying Sub2, selling with seller financing. So, super excited to have you on here today. Now, I know you and I had a conversation recently, and you were telling me about the thousands and thousands of homes that you guys have sold with seller financing. So I'm sure you've learned a lot through the years and then doing transactions for other people. Tell us about your background and how you got started in real estate.
Oh, goodness, Wally. I kind of got started by default because I was supposed to be an engineer who for some reason went to law school because, I'll tell people I just flatly wasn't ready to go up, to grow up in that regard. And after law school, I took a job with a real estate development firm here in Dallas. That job lasted all in all of 1 year because that's when the real estate crash hit back in 1985. Now, if you're in real estate, you are out of business. And so, of course, when they laid you off, you don't realize when you're young that no one's going to hire you in the middle of a major recession going on. So you go out and you start beating the streets and you try to start figuring out things to do. And of course, for that whole 1 year you had a job, and with all that world of knowledge you built over the last 7 years of school, of course, it makes you really smart, right? But it doesn't teach you a thing about how to make money. So you go out and you start beating the streets trying to figure out how to make money. And so I had spent a year in the real estate field, so I thought, hey, let's go try that. And I put together what we call a syndication, which is just really marrying financing with the investors and the properties all together and ready to close on 100 duplexes here in the Dallas area that had been in the foreclosure at that point in time. And of course, just before closing, and this was going to be a home run because I was the only guy in the middle collecting my brokerage fees as a lawyer. I'd put it together, so I'm getting a piece of the action. I'm going to manage the properties. Well, they changed our tax laws. And what happens, of course, when that happens is it shut everything down. And instead of just walking away, I went and opened my mouth to these banks I had been doing business with and asked them what their next step was. And of course, they didn't know because they were going to foreclose on them. And they didn't have any contacts here in the Dallas area. So I always teach students when I'm talking to them, you got to just open your mouth and ask, right? So I asked them if they needed a property manager. They said yes. And somehow they said, you got it. My problem, of course, is I had never managed a piece of property in my entire life, didn't know what to do. And you spend literally the next week or two, and here in Dallas, I was at the SMU Law Library researching management contracts, leasing, reading the Texas Property Code, what to do, what not to do, how to do it, and really self-taught. I know it's kind of funny to a lot of your students because they all grew up in an era where we had the internet and computers and whatnot. And not to really show my age too much here, William, but we didn't have computers. We didn't have the internet. Al Gore hadn't invented that yet. He was still working on it, I think. And it teaches you to learn this business, right?
Yeah.
And you have just to have the gumption to get up and go and do it, which is one of the things I see so many students being scared to do is just to go do it because they're too scared to fail.
Right.
But anyhow, I put the deal together with these companies. I wound up managing these duplexes for years and years and years, and it turned out to be a great revenue source. And eventually they sold them off over the years as things got better, went on. But along the way, I got involved in commercial real estate very heavily. Again, as a young kid, I didn't realize that real estate wasn't selling in the middle of a recession. I didn't know that banks wouldn't lend you money. And I had a lot of great experiences I learned, but you weren't making any money. What do you do? So I decided to start my law practice one day back in 1988, pretty much taking whatever would walk in the front door, and went out and started hustling. But along the way, because of real estate, I had learned to talk to people, and it opens up avenues. Met a gentleman in my duplexes who was a contractor. We decided to go buy our first house. We bought our first house probably back in 1988 or 1989. Got it rehabbed, put together, had a private investor help us finance it, sold it. We all made some money on it, and it simply teaches you how to start the ball game going. And one day, while I'm in my office, I had a young kid, and don't laugh at this, but he was living in the beauty shop behind my office suite, living in the beauty shop. And he asked me about sweat equity, and one thing after the next, we started our investment company, and we started buying houses. And of course, when you have all these diplomas, you have these great looks, and you got a quarter, about all that gets you is a cup of coffee back in that day. And we had to go out and learn how to borrow money. And of course, banks aren't going to lend you money without experience. You have to develop experience. And they didn't use the term back then, hard money, of course. It was just private, lenders.
Right.
And we started borrowing money with private lenders. We learned how to rehab houses. And of course, like most young investors, we screwed up, putting too much money into it. We learned that realtors made all the money, title companies, mortgage companies, and we weren't making anything. And you have to rethink your system. And so we started rethinking into the creative finance world. Back in those days, William, you remember a little bit, they had there were still some old FHA non-qualified consumables and those kind of items along the way. We bought a few of those. They were easy. You started learning how to warehouse properties. And as you start to buy volume, and we were getting more private capital, finally, as the marketplace started to loosen up, after talking to probably over 100 banks, and again, you have to understand, banks don't lend money to rookie investors with no credit, with no money. I got one bank to say yes to do one deal. That one deal turned into 2 to 4 to 8, and eventually we did over 1,000 loans with that one bank alone. But when you start to generate volume with properties, unless you are independently wealthy and can afford the interest carry, you've got to find a way to offset that, because back in the early 1990s, as we were building steam, we were buying 20 plus houses a month. And when you do that, you've got one big thing out there. It's called interest carry. And you've got to have a way to carry that, because if you buy 20 houses in month 1, they don't become income producing in month 2.
Right.
And so in month 2, you've got 40, and in month 3, you've got 60 houses sitting there, and that's a chunk of change you got to pay out.
Right.
And that's where we started to learn the creative finance game of using. And back at this time frame, the Texas Property Code allowed you a lot more latitude than it does today. We could do lease purchases,
Right.
do lease options, we could do contract for deeds, and we were able, just through ourselves, our own knowledge bases, through working with other investors here locally as we were all trying to figure the same game out, we started putting the pieces together that worked. And we learned how to get our properties income producing quickly using creative finance.
Right.
And we would actually, what our best mechanism was using a contract for deed with a mortgage held in escrow.
Mm-hmm.
That allowed us to get it to our bank for financing, get it income producing, season it, and then eventually we learned how to sell mortgages into the secondary marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
And over time with that, you learn that, well, in order to make more money on your mortgages that you sell, you've got to get more information on your borrower. You have to process your borrower. Of course, today we use an RMLO for processing.
Right.
But back in the day, that term didn't exist. And in fact, no one processed anybody.
Mm-hmm.
We implemented processing everybody back then because it would help us generate more capital along the way. But as you start to do this, Wally, like anything else, you kind of have to crawl before you can walk, before you can run, right?
Right.
And you learn this business from the ground up. I don't think I've found anybody that comes in on the top level yet and becomes an expert overnight in this industry.
Mm-hmm.
But we learned all these creative finance techniques. And of course, what happens is over time, the laws change. A few bad investors come in that cause the laws to change for everybody.
Right.
And you have to morph with time and learn different options.
Mm-hmm.
So you go back to here in Texas in 2001, one investor changed our contract for deed laws forever.
Right.
And just made it almost impossible to work with the consumer in that regard. So because of that, you then go into the full mortgage route, doing wraparound mortgages instead of doing the lease options or contract deeds. And then it's just learning what the code says here in Texas. How do you play with the various dynamics, and what can help you make the most money based upon what your goals are and what it is you want to accomplish.
Right. Yeah. When I first got started, my problem wasn't, I had good credit, I had a job and that sort of thing. But what I discovered was that the banks, even with good credit and a little bit of money, they'll only lend you typically, especially if you're new, they're going to lend you money to borrow a few houses, maybe 6 or 8. And then they're going to say, this is the word they like to use, exposure. We have a lot of exposure with you, so we're going to limit that. And I knew I couldn't replace my job income. And so that's when I started looking to Subject2. Now, one of the questions you'll get from a lot of new investors is that buying property Subject2 is illegal. And having an attorney on here is a good opportunity to ask that question. I know you guys buy a lot of property Subject2, so I'm guessing it's really not illegal.
You think? I find that funny, and William, I'm going to answer your question direct, but I go back to 2008, 2009 in the Texas marketplace, and every investor, it seemed like, in Dallas, Fort Worth were coming to me because I was one of these. I had a lot of exposure in the investment community at that time, both as an attorney, as a buyer, as really one of the largest hard money lenders in Texas at that point. And everybody was screaming, going, what do we do? We can't sell our homes. And of course, the answer was seller financing. Right. Everybody had forgotten how to do it during the subprime era, back when you could fog a mirror, you could get a loan, right?
Yep. And
it was easy money. Well, when everything just cratered, everybody forgot about creative finance and seller financing. And so we put together the programs and disclosures because nothing existed to have proper disclosures between sellers and buyers. And of course, the laws were changing along the way as well with that. And we did that. But I'd go out on road shows, as I'd call it. I was going all over the state, meeting with realtors and whatnot, trying to teach them how to do this business to help their clients, because it would generate legal business for us as well. And you would get just stuck with these arms crossed going, no way you're going to do it. It's illegal. You heard that everywhere you went. Yep. And of course, it's not.
Right.
Here in Texas, if you read our contracts for sale that the Texas Real Estate Commission promulgates, it has a check on there for seller financing.
Right.
We have a seller financing addendum. We have a provision in the Texas Property Code. It's section 5.061 that says if you're going to sell a home and leave an existing lien in debt in place, here's the language you must have in a form provide every buyer at least 7 days in advance.
Mhm.
So if you have all these things out there, the Texas Real Estate Commission, the Texas Property Code, do you think it's illegal?
Well,
No.
well, that was always my reply to that. Have you looked at a HUD? I mean, line 503, 203, buyer and seller side, existing loans taken subject to.
Yeah.
It's on the Alta. I mean, it's out there. It's on the form. So, I mean,
And it's just that, the sad part was back at that time,
Mhm.
realtors are never taught this part of the real estate investment.
Right.
Never taught subject to or wraparound mortgage or any of that nature. In fact,
Mhm.
it promulgates itself, it seems like, and it just builds because you have the blind leading the blind, and they all think you just can't do it. And it really, unfortunately, it's ignorance.
Right.
Had these agents known about this type of a business and had learned it from people like yourself or us who actually understand it,
Mhm.
here in Texas at that time, we had about 200,000 agents. That number was cut by more than half. How many agents could have still been out there making good money? How many people could they have helped along the way
Right.
if they had just known about this?
Right. Yeah. I actually met an agent several years ago who not only knew about it, man, they took it to another level. This was in a small town in Georgia, or smaller town, and they were buying up VA. They would make contact. Agents, I mean, really have it made. They walk in with the instant credibility of being a licensed real estate agent. So most people think they know everything there is to know. They're the expert. They walk in. The seller doesn't have enough equity to list with an agent. They can't afford to come out of pocket. And I've got a student, for example, that uses this to be very successful. He instantly switches into investor mode and says, well, I have a solution that I can offer you where I can buy your house and it'll take nothing out of pocket. But this guy that I met, he lived in an Air Force base community. And when he met with a prospective seller that didn't have a lot of equity, which a lot of these guys don't, he would instantly do that and had bought dozens and dozens and dozens of houses, VA loans, subject to. So, I mean, he obviously understood it and took big advantage of it for himself. So, yeah, it's an excellent strategy.
No, it is. But what I try to teach real estate agents today
Mhm.
is a recognition factor.
Right.
I don't necessarily want to teach realtors how to be an investor because a lot of realtors don't want to be.
Right.
If they do, they can come over and learn on the investor side, right?
Mhm.
Because the realtor side is very different than the investor side. The real estate side, as a realtor, is just recognition of the situation and then having the knowledge and the contact of who to take them to help them out and get them through it. But as an investor, you're exactly right. Sellers, for the most part,
Right.
understand they have a problem and they can't sell, right?
Mhm.
They've already talked to a realtor who's already told them, we're sorry, we can't help you.
Mhm.
So when I'm meeting with that seller to talk to about buying their home, all I'm going to do is in a very polite way, tell them what they already know. And then I'm going to tell them what their options are. And they already know that the first three don't work. They don't have the money to close the deal. The house needs repairs. They can't make it, et cetera, et cetera. But there's always that option with creative finance for us to come in and buy the home subject to the debt. And once you can get them to recognize that point, then you're on board. And from there, it's just negotiating the deal to make the deal work for both the seller and the buyer.
Right. Absolutely. And back to what we were saying earlier, of course, my favorite exit, just for creating cash flow purposes, is seller financing. So, I can buy a house with, especially in a really good market, I can buy a house with very little equity. Let's just say we're dealing with a $100,000 house, just to make the numbers simple. I can come in and buy a house that's worth 100 for 90. Mark it up just a tiny bit, because you and I both know if I've got $100,000 house and I call 5 appraisers, I'm going to get a $10,000 or $15,000 variance in value. So if I sell this $100,000 house for 105 or 109 with seller financing, I can collect several, $10,000 down, and do a contract for deed with them, create a decent cash flow, and then another back end. So I can take practically a zero equity home and make $30,000 or $40,000 on it over a period of several years.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, you look at that, and I always say, first off, what's a house worth? Is what someone's willing to pay for it.
Right.
As you just denoted, though, it has to be a reasonable markup.
Yeah.
Of course, unfortunately, there are those people out there who think you can mark it up $40,000, $50,000 like that, and it doesn't work, right? But when you understand that, number one, if you were to go to a mortgage company to borrow money on a $100,000 house, you're paying about 3 to 4% in fees somewhere out the door.
Right.
It used to be more with FHA even. Along the way, when we as investors realize that what we're doing is we're selling first and foremost an opportunity to buy a home. We're selling a reasonable and affordable down payment that they can afford, and we're selling a reasonable monthly payment. Now, we're not selling that particular house in a particular neighborhood in a particular school district. We're selling an opportunity that they can buy, that they can afford. So instead of renting, they can own.
Right.
And that's what allows us, I think, to have that reasonable markup. Now, that markup may be anywhere from 5 to 15% based upon the house, the deal, the location, condition, et cetera. But you can't push it much more, because otherwise the monthly payment is going to take you out of the marketplace, and the house is going to sit because you're asking too much for it.
Right. But I know exactly what you're talking about. And it's those people who will take that $100,000 house that it has a true value of 100,000 and sell it for 130 or 140 or 150. And that's where you get the laws that come into play.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah, it takes you back to the old saying about, pigs getting fat and hogs getting slaughtered. You have to operate your business ethically. And we want our buyers to stay in the house and be able to refinance in 3 or 4 years and get a good low interest rate loan, and we get another back end payment, and because we can move on to the next thing and buy another house.
Wally, with that in mind, and you're exactly right. There's an old saying, of course, you make money when you buy, not when you sell. But selling a house, taking it back, having to refurb it in some regard, remarket it, resell it, spend more time in trouble. Right. Could you make more money? You can make a little bit. You make the most money by, buy, sell, repeat, and dealing with positive scenarios and not dealing with negative situations.
Right. Yep. I
agree with that.
Yeah. Totally. I've run into investors in my 20 years of doing this, that their business model is actually, I hope they don't buy it. I hope they move out. And it makes me sick. Because it cheats that person. You're selling the dream of home ownership. First of all, you want somebody that's going to come in there and actually purchase. And it's like I said, it's just too easy to get out there and do another deal without that added energy spent on getting somebody out, finding somebody new, and that sort of thing. That's why I stopped completely exiting with a lease option, because I found over the years that 80% of lease option buyers don't exercise, where 80% or better of land contract or actually home buyers will exercise or will go out and get new financing. So we stopped doing lease option exits altogether.
Totally agree with you about the lease option side, and about the whether you use a land contract state or a mortgage state, either way it might be. But I used to own a mortgage company also for many years, and when you understand that a prospective buyer, if you have a lease option buyer, they don't own the house yet.
Right.
They don't have a pay history. Yeah, they're paying rent. They're not paying a mortgage. On the other hand, if you take them where they are now in a mortgage, they're making a mortgage payment. Maybe you have them with a third-party loan servicer collecting the payment who can generate a legitimate pay history. And that buyer goes to a mortgage company now to get a mortgage. They are much more likely to get refinanced than that lease option buyer is.
Right.
And so I think there's a lot more benefit to helping people buy the house, get in it. By the way, they get a little thing called a tax write-off, right?
Exactly.
Which helps them with their payments, their down payment, things of that nature. But if the goal is to get them towards that refinance, I think that's the best way to do it, as opposed to the lease option.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of guys out there who teach lease option though. And I'm not here to dissuade students about lease options per se. It is a strategy that can be used when used right. Texas is a little bit more unique than many other states, unfortunately, as well. There's a time and place for all of that.
Yeah.
And, you know, at least with an option to buy, with us buying it from an investor, as an investor, there are no issues. It's only when you're dealing with that consumer does it become really more of an issue out there.
The Sub2Deals Show with your host, Sub2 expert William Tingle. We'll be right back.
Listen up, investors. Ever wanted to learn the right way to do a loan modification? Strong Jacob and Associates has a do-it-yourself course complete with text, video, and legal support. Learn the right way to lower monthly payments and add real value to a distressed seller while you improve your monthly cash flow by securing lower mortgage payments via loan modification. Don't delay. Visit www.preventforeclosure.us or give Kevin a call today at 253-753-9595.
Back to the show, the Sub2Deals Show with your host, Sub2 expert William Tingle.
Well, and a part of it is how you take it on. You can't put somebody in with a lease and option. And some things, even though they may be legal, they're not right. I mean, I just believe that. Even though something may be the law, it doesn't mean that it's right. I can't put somebody in a house on a lease and option and expect them to make all of the repairs. Most judges won't allow it. I've seen this in court. When I first got started as an investor, one of the things that I did, I used to go sit in eviction court just to get a feel for the different judges sitting on the bench, what they liked, what they didn't like. And just to see how the rulings went. And I did that before I ever was in front of one of those judges. And they just don't like that sort of thing in general. They don't own the house. You own it. How are you going to make them fix it? You know, you can ask them to do minor repair stuff, but in general, you can't expect them to put in a new AC unit or something like that if it breaks.
Nope. You know, and here in Texas, you can't waive your landlord duties and responsibilities.
Right. Yeah.
But if I do have a lease purchase, let's say, not a lease option with someone where maybe I'm giving them purchase credit
Right.
of some type, I might be able to reduce that purchase credit if I have to do repairs.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to be able to shirk my responsibilities as a landlord.
Exactly. So, Scott, tell me, you know, I know Texas is a tough state for some of the stuff that we like to do, like contract for deed, because I've got a lot of students that are there and they come back and say, okay, I can't do this. I have to either do a wrap. And I don't like wraps on subject twos for a couple of reasons. One, I don't like to convey legal title. If there's equity in that deal and for some reason I ever wanted to pull it out, if I've sold it on a wrap, that makes it impossible pretty much to go back and refi and do things like that. So what is your ideal solution? If I'm an investor and I'm operating in Texas and I buy subject to and I want to sell with seller financing, what is the ideal way to do that there for the maximum benefit for me and to get the deal done?
So I'm going to back you up just a little bit. So let me just kind of update you, tell your students a bit about who we are here in Texas and how this will blend into that answer, okay?
Okay.
So obviously, I'm very fortunate to be a real estate and title attorney. I used to have 4 title offices before the 2009 crash hit. That went down to 1. We're back up to 2 right now, hoping to bring on 3 here soon. We deal in the investor marketplace very heavily throughout the Texas marketplace. Along the way, our law firm, and I never knew this was going to happen, William, but somehow we got into this owner finance situation and became one of the go-to law firms to help people with seller financing. And of course, along the way, over my career, we probably closed some 10,000 different types of creative finance deals, whether it's sub-twos or wraps, contract for deeds, lease options, purchases, you name it, you kind of do all of that. Of course, as we said earlier, as an investor, you know, I have bought some 35, 36, 3,700 properties and rehabbed them. And almost all of those have been sold with some type of creative finance. Along the way, we've done so many things. We were Texas's largest hard money lender from about 97 to 09. And today we have what is called the Owner Finance Network, and we'll talk about that in a little bit down the road. But all this combines brings in this huge amount of experience that just helps you realize what you used to do, what you can do, what you can't do, And how do you maximize your dollars out there? Now, today, I think to go out and buy a home, there are two ways to buy a house, I think, today. It's either going to be cash of some type. That's hard work to buy that, and you got to have access to the capital, obviously, to do it. And two, it is using the creative formats. And that creative format is either buying a house subject to the existing debt, buying it on a wraparound loan from the seller based on who our seller is. Sometimes I find if we have a more sophisticated seller, they might want to do a wrap loan as opposed to a sub-2 and maybe a second lien for equity. And oftentimes, if our seller has no debt, we might be able to do a direct on finance, right? And as we're buying that house, it's really just a matter to me of just negotiating the best deal you can with that seller to get the deal. Now, once we have it, the question is going to be, what's our back end strategy? Every investor is a little bit different in what their strategy is. There are some investors who want to be landlords. Not a problem. Now, if you're going to buy a home sub-2 and your goal is to be a landlord or to do a fix and flip, we might talk about putting that property into a land trust somehow. We'll talk about that later on. I know you want to get into that a little bit. Number two, though, if our goal is to do a lease option to our buyer, the problem with that is that here in Texas, our lease option laws really kind of screw us around a little bit. A lease option for the first 180 days, actually 179 days is okay to do, but we have to terminate it at that point in time because we don't want it to become an executory contract or a contract for deed. Right. And it becomes one, not because it is, it becomes one because our property code now defines it as such. And it does a pretty poor job at that, unfortunately. We cannot sell a home to a back-end, excuse me, to the back-end buyer using a contract for deed. The property code excludes it if you have existing debt. And even if you own it debt-free, there's several hoops you must jump through up front before you can even do it. Next, if you jump through all those hoops and you do a contract for deed on a house you own debt-free, the buyer can request to be converted to a mortgage at any time. Within 14 days, you must convert him to a mortgage. So knowing those things are out there, why even mess with that? You'll find that most lawyers in the Texas marketplace, I don't mind buying a house with a contract for deed as an investor. That's a different ballgame. But when you're selling to a back-end consumer who's going to be an owner-occupant, right, we have to understand the contracting mechanisms, and we're just going to suggest don't do it at all. Just totally avoid it. Right. So because of the Texas marketplace and the changes in our laws, what we're going to do is we're going to do your favorite thing, a wraparound mortgage. Mm-hmm. Why? It's really what we're limited to do in the Texas marketplace. Right. But again, we have very attractive foreclosure laws here. Mm-hmm. I don't know what they are in Colorado. Right. I've done some studied Arizona a little bit where we do business, and they've got a 6-month foreclosure process. Right. Here in Texas, we're about 43 days. Right. We can move really quick, which sometimes takes some of that heartburn off of doing a land contract or a contract for deed in Colorado versus a wraparound mortgage here a little bit. Right. So I'm okay in doing the wrap loans and understanding how that's going to work. Just because I know if there is a default issue, we can very quickly regain that ownership and get it going. Right. The negative is you can't refinance your underlying debt. Right. Okay. So your recommendation in a state like Texas that is says no to contract for deed is just to go ahead and do the wrap. Yep. Yep. And if this was pre-2009, oh baby, we were doing pre-2001 we were doing contract for deeds. Right. Before 2005, we were doing lease options, lease purchase. Mm-hmm. That went out the window also. Right. And so we're fairly much stuck doing the wraparound mortgage. Right. Well, let me ask you about a scenario that I've had a couple of students in the past that talk a lot about. They talk about doing something a little bit different.
And they'll take, of course, Sub2, which every property we buy, we take in a trust. So that's a topic for another day. We could talk about trust all day long, but why they're great. But if we're buying Sub2 and we take title in a trust, and then we have someone that we want to sell our finance to, we sell them. This is what my students told me they're doing. They sell the beneficial interest of the trust and secure it with an UCC filing. And they'll foreclose that out if the people default. Are you familiar with that? And what do you think about it?
Oh, goodness. First off, I like the KISS, synopsis. Let's keep it simple, stupid, right?
Right.
I don't want to be trying to explain something like that to a home buyer. They don't get it. If
Yep.
they have a realtor, they really don't get it.
Right.
And I think you're really paddling upstream.
Yeah.
Something like that. Securing a beneficial interest with the UCC filing. I have to be honest, William. I don't know the legalities behind that offhand.
Yeah.
I've never done it before.
Right.
Uh,
Well, the argument is you're not selling the property now. You're selling the beneficial interest of a trust, of course, is personal property. So that's what you're selling. And of course, I don't know how in the world your buyer would refinance that. I don't know how that works.
the buyer's not going to refinance that.
Right.
It's not going to be refinanceable.
Right.
So first off, you talk about a land trust, right?
Right.
Most investors don't even know what a land trust is, because here in Texas, it's nothing more than a DBA.
Right.
Secondly, they always bring up, and I'm sure you've heard this, well, I want anonymity, right?
Oh, yeah.
And of course, I ask that question, why? That has never once crossed my mind in my 30-year real estate career. And I have done buku transactions over the years.
Mhm.
And if it hasn't bothered me, why is it going to bother you?
Yeah.
Not only that, but I don't not hunt down investors and try to see what they own or don't own. I don't care. I haven't got that reason for it. And I've heard all the various legal arguments about trust.
Mhm.
Now, if you're going to rent a property or you're going to do a fix and flip and you bought it Sub2, I'm okay in buying it into a land trust.
Mhm.
By the way, buying that property subject to in a land trust is a violation of due on sale.
Yep.
Well, that land trust is not a legitimate financial planning trust on behalf of the seller.
Exactly.
Period. Now, I understand the mortgage company may not know that. They may not research it. But at the end of the day, it's not, and it is a violation. You get that into a lawyer's hands, they'll know it pretty quickly.
Mhm.
But it does work to maybe disguise some things. And
Right.
I'm not negative about doing that in those instances. But if you're going to sell it to a home buyer and it's going to be their homestead, there are multiple disclosures we have to go through between us and that buyer. Even selling the beneficial interest, same thing.
Right.
If it's going to be their homestead, you better make sure they have all the proper disclosures.
Mhm.
Next, the conveyance of that beneficial interest to a third party again, that's a violation of due on sale.
Yeah.
So if you're going to have all these due on sale violations, why are we going through all this mess? I've never figured it out, and I still don't know it.
Yeah.
So my preference is buy that property into your LLC,
Mhm.
into your corporation. If you're going to do a wrap loan, let's go ahead and just do a wrap loan,
Mhm.
because they're all violations.
Right.
Any of these scenarios of due on sale.
Right.
I can sit down and I can draw you up a diagram of how to buy a home Sub2 into a land trust, how to do an assumption to our LLC and do a wrap loan back to the land trust, and then do an assignment of the beneficial interest. Now that takes a lot of paperwork, it's a lot of money, but at least what it does is it substitutes us back into the middle of the transaction, so I could foreclose on my land trust.
Mhm.
But I'm not going to be a fan of that UCC mechanism.
Right.
I think it's tenuous at best. I will research that, by the way. I want to know a little bit more about it, but just on the surface, I'm going to tell you I don't like it.
Yeah.
If I'm dealing with a home buyer who wants to buy the property, they're going to want to have a mortgage. They're going to have a deed, not a beneficial interest assignment. It's very hard to do that. If you're dealing with a realtor, you're going to blow the deal day one, because they certainly won't understand the deal either. And the more traditional, and this I think is an important part, the more traditional we can keep our transactions, I think the better that it is.
Oh yeah.
We don't want this to look different. We don't want this to look weird. We want this to look like a traditional standard mortgage. William, if you're going to buy a house and you're going to go to a mortgage company, you go through loan processing, right?
Mhm.
And you go to an underwriter and you get approved, and you go to a law firm or a title company and you close the deal.
Right.
Well, if we're selling our house to a home buyer under a wrap mortgage of some sort, we can process that buyer, traditional mechanisms like anybody else. If we can use a loan servicer like every other lender does,
Mhm.
if we can close at a law firm or a title company, where you keep all these things traditional, customary, and ordinary, you take the fear factor out of it.
Right.
And when things seem right, they usually are right.
Mhm.
But when you start doing all this funky stuff with, just doing kitchen tabletop closings, assigning a beneficial interest, I know we've talked a little bit about that old pack trust thing that they used to use out there.
Yeah.
I don't want to get involved in that.
Yeah.
I don't want to try to explain to a buyer that I can as an attorney, but the average investor out there who's trying to assign a beneficial interest, who's going to explain to this homeowner what in the world they're doing?
Yeah.
And while doing that, my question then becomes, are they going to be practicing law without a license, or are they acting as a financial planner without a license? I just don't want to go there.
Right.
And so I like to keep things as simple as possible, keep it customary, keep it ordinary. And when you do that, I think we wind up with a much better transaction overall.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. I know I tell my students, and I know we talked a little bit earlier about that. Buying remotely, it's absolutely a necessity just because you're not there. But the more normal people you can use in your transaction, whether that's using a real estate agent to show your house and get it under contract initially, using a mortgage broker to process your buyer, doing a closing with a title company or an attorney. In addition to taking those loads off of you personally, it just gives your business so much more legitimacy because you're using licensed people to do everything. Those are the people that most buyers deal with in a normal transaction. So they don't have to be scared that, well, maybe this guy's a scammer because, investors have a reputation for being shady anyway.
Oh, and those are the guys we want to get out of the business that are out there. But while we in that line, and I should have done this 10 years ago and I didn't, but here in the last few years, we created here in Texas what's called the Owner Finance Network, which is really not just local, it's national though. And what we did was we brought all of this under one umbrella. We did it to make it a one-stop shop because the investors didn't know where to go. They're getting wrong information from wrong people. And so here at what we call the OFN, the Owner Finance Network, we have, of course, legal services, title services to close transactions, and again, title work when it's needed and wanted between a seller and or a buyer. We have the loan processing that's out there as well to help put that deal together, to do it the right way. And I say the right way of loan processing because so many loan processors want to insert themselves in the transaction. They want to charge more money to draft a closing disclosure. We don't need to do that. We want to help our people save money.
Right.
They want to review the paperwork and review the documents. They have a loan processor in today's owner finance world. I call them a necessary evil, unfortunately, because of the SAFE Act that came into play. But they want to insert themselves into our transactions to approve the deals. They're not licensed to do that. We, as the seller, because we're the lender, we're the underwriter, we're the approval process, not some third party. And so here at the OFN, we make sure we understand all that. And of course, their job is to create a financial package so that we as the seller can consider and verify the financial information so that we can then approve our borrower appropriately. We have our loan servicing as well. The loan servicing, although we're here in Texas, we're in Arizona, we're in Florida, we're moving to Georgia and Carolinas and Ohio and across the country right now with that, is an entity that was created by an investor, myself, for investors, and set up to protect the investor better as well. We wanted to bring all this in under one umbrella to be a service to our industry, help them understand how to do this business the right way, to give them the resources they need to do it the right way, so that we can keep doing this, for as long as possible, wherever it might be.
Right. So this is a service that isn't in all states now, but you expect it to be at some point?
Well, the Owner Finance Network is a training site where I teach students how to do owner finance business.
I got you.
But I teach them my way. I'm listening to you talk, William, and I love hearing the things you say, because you do teach things the right way. There's a right and wrong way, and each state's going to be a little bit different. We understand that.
Right.
And it's all about how you navigate it. But it's also about being smart. And so really our training is good for anywhere in the country in what you do. Our closing options are here in Texas. I do closings in other states as well. We act as an escrow agent. But we, as to our loan processing and loan servicing, we're currently doing that. We're doing loan servicing we're slowly getting licensed in multiple states as we go out. And of course, we're targeting the most prolific states for seller financing out there first as we go out on a national basis to do that.
Okay. That sounds great. I mean, just having I guess, one point where you can pick up on all of those steps that's going to be good for every place. And you're right. Every state's just a little bit different. I mean, you run into like Texas, for example, which is surprising for Texas, because I don't know, Texas is sort of the Wild West anyway, that they're so strict. But you told me it was pretty much one guy that got y'all into the regulation that you're in right now. That sounds like an interesting story.
Oh, well, I'm not gonna drop names.
Right.
But one guy owned a series of duplexes southeast of downtown Fort Worth, and that's when the tornado came through. And instead of letting his borrowers have insurance in their names, he carried the insurance.
Right.
When all the damage occurred, he collected all the money. He just didn't fix the properties.
Oh, wow.
That's what changed our contract for deed laws in Texas right there. And then 3 or so people, Houston and down in the valley, next to Mexico, changed our lease option laws where they were taking advantage of people.
Right.
And it was just greedy investors trying to take advantage of people. Why we always are trying to promote our industry the right way.
Oh, yeah.
Because this is a great business, William, as you know. It is fun to do. There are some moving parts. I get it. We can make a lot of money using other people's credit along the way, right?
Oh, yeah.
Our Sub2 deals. It's awesome. But we have to do it right. We want to protect our sellers. We want to protect our buyers. And we do things right. The legislatures don't get involved in our back pocket. Right now in Texas, today, there is a legislator out in El Paso tried to pass a bill 2 years ago requiring every investor to be a licensed RMLO. And again, that's back up in Austin under House Bill 216. With your permission, I'm going to say, for anyone who is here in the Texas marketplace, go visit the texas100.org website. And that is a website where you can donate money to, where we pay our lobbyists. And the Texas 100 is a group of 100 investors who put up about $300,000 to get the ball game going. Last year, we won with the help of Eddie Speed and the Seller Finance Coalition. The Seller Finance Coalition is the national industry that helps to fight this on a national level, but we have to have a state level. I don't know if you have that in Colorado or not, but they keep trying to change our laws. And the problem is investors have to realize it takes a village to work together to do this. But we can't do it individually. We have to do it through one person. So it's important to keep track of this stuff and what's going on in our industry, so we can band together to do this. Using an RMLO today, I have no objection with that. I think it's a great thing to do to make sure that buyers can afford their homes.
Yeah.
Using a loan servicer is a great way to prevent fraud and whatnot. I have no objection to that. And it helps keep some of the bad actors out of our business, right? But again, they keep changing. And again, one guy in El Paso created all this and got the bee under this one lady's bonnet who want to go after this as her her thing to do, unfortunately.
Mhm. So this website, again, it's texas100.org.
I believe that's what it is.
Okay. All right. We'll make sure that that's in the show notes. Because if
That's an
you're,
important thing to know.
I'm sorry.
That's just an important thing to know for
Oh, absolutely.
the Texas marketplace.
Yeah. If, I mean, certainly if you've got that going on, I mean, you're absolutely right. You have to work together. One person's not going to get anything done, but enough people working together and supporting and funding, because you got to spend some money. Sometimes you got to open your wallet.
It is. And by the way, we investors are cheap, William,
Mhm.
especially me, but you have to do it, unfortunately. And herding, it was like herding cats, like trying to herd investors, because we don't know who the investors are. We're not a licensed industry at this time.
Right. Okay.
Hopefully
All right.
it will come to fruition.
Yep.
Let's keep going, my friend.
All right, sure. Well, Scott, tell us again about your owner finance network. So if anybody's interested in coming along, I know you do the training there, you do that personally. So tell us again about that so anybody can find that if they want to take advantage of it.
So again, it's theownerfinancenetwork.com.
Mm-hmm.
And all it is a vertically integrated company that combines legal, title, note pro services, we call it, if they need help to structure a deal, loan processing and loan servicing, all under one roof.
Right.
Then, if you really want to learn about seller financing, how to buy, sell, and all the ins and outs, then we have our training programs on there. And William, we are pretty inexpensive because we are vertically integrated. We don't have to charge thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for this. We're inexpensive. Like you, we have something that's called the Subject2 Academy. The Sub2 Academy is a 2-hour a month webinar series, where we get on and we answer everybody's questions about seller financing.
Right.
And we answer questions whether it's in Texas or Colorado or Florida or California. It's all about how to do this business and how to do it the right way to support that. And I know that my business partner is going to reach out to you about that a little bit.
Okay.
Because I say it's a very expensive thing. It's $19.95 a month, but it's the best $20 you can pay along the way to have real, legitimate information. And so often investors want to call me, and of course, what they're doing is looking for free legal advice. Well, I'm $350 an hour.
Right.
So imagine that for a minute. You're welcome to call me, but I'm going to give you the same advice on our webinar there with the Sub2 Academy just as well. But really what we want to be is a platform to help our industry do this business the right way, be a resource, help push guys like you who really help to train people more. I'm not necessarily a trainer like you are. I'm not a mentor, but what we want to do is help people have a platform where to go and get legitimate information.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. I'll tell you, I had a conversation earlier today with somebody there. It seems like every time the market gets hot, you get all these people pop up that you've never heard of before, but all of a sudden they're the expert out there. You never heard their names. I call them nurus because they're not gurus. They're nurus,
I like that name. I have not heard that before.
But they're the expert. You can be in their mentorship or their coaching program for $10,000 or $20,000, and they'll tell you all about how to do it. And I just think that's really funny. We have that come up, but it's a pleasure speaking to somebody who just totally goes on about doing it the right way, because that's the only way we're going to be able to continue to do this, or they're going to shut it down completely at some point.
Well, they do. And, again, we will never weed out all the bad actors, all the bad apples. It's just the nature of any business. I don't care whether you're an attorney, an accountant, whatever it might be. There's always bad people wherever you go. I get it.
Right.
You try.
Yeah.
We can help police our own environment a little bit. But the biggest thing is for us as investors. And as you know, I'm an attorney, et cetera, but I'm also really an investor. That's my love. That's my passion. We want to do this stuff the right way. When we do it the right way, we're able to do it more. We're able to do it longer. And we also make more money doing it the right way, in my opinion, as well.
Yeah.
You don't need to go out there and mess people around and do this business the right way. And it is wonderful when you get the chance to do this kind of things. You know, when I started pushing this out statewide back in 2009, and really at that time, the sub-2 was the only way of doing this business. You realize you can really help a seller who's in distress or out of options, right? When you're working with a back-end home buyer who wants to buy a house, they're a good home buyer. They've got the money, but because of the fickle mortgage laws, they can't get a loan right now.
Right.
You can help them. Along the way, you can help the neighborhood because they don't get a foreclosure and a blight on their neighborhood. And you can help the banks not going through a foreclosure, right? And when that light bulb goes off, and you go, holy cow, I can do all these phenomenal, great things, and I can make money in the middle while doing it, and I can make tens and tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars over years, because this is a long-term business. It's a finance business using other people's credit and not mine. It's a home run, man.
Oh, I know.
I'll pull my baseball glove up here and say, it's a home run.
Yeah, it is amazing. You can help a lot of people and you can make just dang good money. I mean, I think about the years and years I worked 70 hours a week in the restaurant business. And I mean, I used to say after I'd been an investor for 2 or 3 years, I said, if you don't wake up every morning with the cheesiest grin on your face, you're just not doing it right. Because I mean, it's an incredible life.
Well, I never planned to be in real estate, William. In fact, I will tell you, back when I was a young kid and I'm working in my father's engineering office at that time, and he's dealing with realtors left and right because he ran like 10 survey crews and whatnot along the way. I'm just going, who in the world would ever want to be in real estate? You have got to want to be an idiot to be in real estate. Be careful what you ask for, what you say, because it may come back to bite you, right? But as I got into this business and where I am now, this business drives me. I love it. It is fun putting deals together. It is fun helping people. It is fun to make money doing things the right way and helping everybody on a larger scheme. And I don't know what else I would ever want to do besides this.
No.
I don't know about the Colorado market, but here in the Texas marketplace, because everybody, their mother, brother, dog, and cat is moving to Texas, right? And it's driving up prices everywhere left and right, and it's driving down inventory. In fact, to the point we're building houses today because I can build a house almost cheaper than I can buy it. But it will get back to normal again.
It will.
I really think that in the next few months to come, as forbearances go away and people are left in the same position they were 3, 4, 6 months ago, whatever it might be, that we're going to have a huge opportunity to implement our sub-2 strategies, I think, throughout the United States.
Yeah.
That instance. And I think for students who learn this business, who become a student of owner financing and really learn it well, they're going to have great opportunities, and they can learn to be just as happy as you and I are. And, I will tell you, I still work 70 hours a week, but it's not work. When you love it and you have fun doing it, it's your passion. And that's where you want to get to eventually. That's where I hope your students can get to eventually.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It really is. I enjoy traveling more now than I did in the past. I just got married last year, and so we're still honeymooning. So we like to get around. But I understand.
Just wait, when you've been married for a long time, your hair turns this color, okay?
No, I don't believe it. I don't think that's what did it. But maybe. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see. Like I said, we're 1 year in. We just had our first anniversary this past
week. That is awesome. Well, just a few more things at this point for your students. Here in Texas, what I try to tell people is, one, be very cautious about lease purchases. Know what the Texas Property Code says. Be cautious. Don't get caught in a trap that can cost you a lot of money. And there are attorneys out there who seek things just like that.
Right.
Understand what our contract for deed laws say. We can buy a property with a contract for deed, but we should not sell it to a homeowner using one. I'm not a big fan of using that lease option or the contract for deed to buy a house, because normally I want to get the seller out of the picture.
Right.
Because if we don't have deed record title to that property, if anything hits that seller negative, an IRS tax lien, judgment liens, etc., they may attach to the property, and I may wind up having to buy that if they can't solve the problem. So I usually like to eliminate that problem. Buying the property subject to, I think, provides a much better mechanism to get the seller out of the picture, protect me. But I want to make a big point. Here in Texas, I am always promoting to protect our sellers. We don't just buy a deed to the property. We give our sellers back a deed of trust to secure performance. So if something happens to us, if we can't perform and meet our obligations, our seller has a traditional mechanism to regain the property through foreclosure if they have to. Maybe I can give them a deed in lieu back, who knows? But what I don't want to do is put myself in a position where that seller has to go retain an attorney, because the moment an attorney gets involved, it's costing a lot of money
Right.
to get out of that deal.
Yeah.
From there, looking at back-end strategies, you can do a lease option to a consumer, but it's going to be short-term.
Right.
Can't do the contract for deed. So that leaves us with doing a wraparound mortgage. It's all about disclosure. And again, I think 90% of our business is all about disclosure and understanding. I always say that trained monkeys can draft a note, a deed of trust, and a warranty deed. Those are the easy things to do. It's an understanding of the business. It's an understanding of the compliance. It's helping the investors with proper disclosures, not junk they get off the internet that they try to use. They'll get stuff out of New York to try to use in California, use in Texas, and it doesn't work. And put things together in a way that protects the seller and the buyers. And those are the kind of things that I think help to solidify our transactions and make it a good deal.
Right.
And when we can do that, it works. I always tell people when I'm doing closings and putting this together for them, is that when you have a willing seller and a willing buyer, when you have proper disclosures, when you give them time to actually read the paperwork, go seek counsel if they wish to do so. And what's unfortunate is they never do, but you have to give them the opportunity. And then at the closing table, we close them again, redisclose it all over again, but because we're trying to idiot-proof these transactions. That's when I think we can protect ourselves the best way, whether that's here in Texas, Colorado, Florida, wherever it might be. I think it's smart and wise to think that way. And when we do, I think it's going to help us, be in our businesses a lot longer.
I agree. Yeah. That's
I mean,
great
you've been there
advice.
for what? You said 28 years doing this now?
21.
21?
Yep.
Well, I got you beat a little bit.
Yeah, I know you
don't
do.
stay in business 21 years by doing things wrong, do you?
Right. I
That's
agree.
why I think you want your students to understand. Learn to do this stuff the right way.
Yeah, that's how you stay in business for sure. Because it doesn't take long to ruin your reputation. It takes a lot longer to build a good one than it does to ruin one. That's for sure.
Amen. Yeah.
Well, that's
One
great
time
advice.
only.
Great advice, Scott. I appreciate you. Hey, listen, we really appreciate you coming on and say, I know you're a busy guy. You're doing a lot of stuff, buying a lot of houses and lending money and everything else you do. So we appreciate you taking the time to come on today.
Well, thank you so much. We'll look forward to a chance to talk again. Have your students reach out to us if they need anything at all too. I know you're going to have all of our email addresses and whatnot. We're here to be a service and to help them out. And thanks for the time again.
Yeah, thanks so much. We'll have all your contact information in the show notes so they can reach out to you. We got a lot of Texas students, so I'm sure they'll appreciate this today.
That's great. Well, have a great day, man.
Yeah, thanks. Sub2ers, that is it for this episode of the Sub2Deals Show podcast. You can find the show notes for this episode along with a complete transcript at sub2podcast.com. If you enjoyed this episode, we would love it if you would subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcast. It only takes a minute and it helps others discover the show. And finally, if you haven't yet, you can join our free Facebook Subject To group at sub2forum.com. Scott's a member there, so you can tag him if you've got questions specific to Texas, and I'm sure he'll jump in as he has time to answer those. So until next time, keep learning, keep talking to sellers, and you will buy some houses.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Sub2Deals Show with William Tingle. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review and subscribe. And for more great content and to stay up to date, visit Sub2Deals.com and on Facebook at Sub2Deals. We'll catch you next time.